I've been married to my wife for 7 years. No kids yet. On paper, we looked solid at stable jobs, shared friends, routines that felt comfortable enough to call happy. I trusted her completely. Like, defend her in any room trusted. That's important to say, because it makes what comes next feel even dumber. The first signs weren't dramatic. They were small, annoying things I brushed off because I didn't want to be that guy. She started guarding her phone like it was classified government property. Screen always down. Password suddenly changed. If I walked into the room, she'd tilt it away and snap, "Can you not hover?" Which was new, because I wasn't hovering, just existing. Her attitude shifted too. Everything I did irritated her. The way I breathed. The way I asked how her day was. She'd bite my head off, then 5 minutes later act like nothing happened. If I called it out, she'd tell me I was imagining conflict or looking for problems. That phrase came up a lot. Then there were the schedule changes. Late nights at work that didn't line up with her job. Emergency meetings. Team drinks. She'd come home smelling different, new perfume she swore she'd always worn. When I asked about it, she laughed and said I was paranoid, like it was a joke we were both supposed to be in on. I told myself marriages go through phases. Stress. Burnout. I convinced myself that trusting your spouse means not interrogating every weird detail. So I ignored the tight feeling in my chest and the way my gut kept screaming that something was off. I had no idea how fast everything was about to explode. Once I noticed the cracks, I couldn't unsee them. Every day came with some new tiny inconsistency that didn't deserve a fight on its own but stacked up like bricks on my chest. She'd tell me she was staying late, then forget and mention grabbing dinner near home with coworkers. She'd swear she told me about a weekend work trip, even though I was certain she hadn't. When I said that, she rolled her eyes and snapped, "Wow, sorry I don't document my entire life for you." Somehow I ended up apologizing. The bitchy edge became constant. Sarcasm replaced affection. If I reached for her, she'd pull away and say she was tired. If I asked what was wrong, she'd sigh like I was the problem and say, "Can we not do this right now?" There was always a right now when the conversation wasn't allowed. What messed with my head the most was how convincing she was. Calm. Confident. She lied like someone who had practiced. When I questioned anything, she'd flip it back on me, ask why I didn't trust her, accuse me of being insecure, tell me I was projecting my own issues onto her. After a while, I started doubting my own memory. One night I found myself scrolling through old photos of us, trying to prove to myself that we were still real. That I wasn't losing my mind. She walked in, saw what I was doing, and laughed. "Why are you being so dramatic?" she said, then went to bed without me. That was the first night I slept on the couch, not because we fought, but because I suddenly felt like a guest in my own house. The discovery didn't come from some master plan or heroic snooping. It came from pure accident, which somehow made it worse. Her laptop chimed while she was in the shower. She'd left it open on the kitchen table. I wasn't even going to look. I honestly stood there for a solid minute arguing with myself like a lunatic. Then another notification popped up. A message preview. A name I didn't recognize. And a heart emoji. I wish I could say I handled it calmly. I didn't. My hands were shaking as I sat down. The screen wasn't locked. She'd been sloppy, or maybe she just didn't think I'd ever question her. The messages weren't subtle. Inside jokes. Complaints about me. I can't wait until tonight. A photo of her smiling in the bathroom mirror, one I'd never received. I felt my stomach drop in real time, like my body understood before my brain caught up. I kept scrolling even though it hurt. Plans. Lies lining up perfectly with the late nights. Then one message sealed it, "He still has no idea." That sentence burned. Not just because she was cheating, but because she was mocking me for trusting her. I closed the laptop just as the shower turned off. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. In that moment, I wasn't angry yet. I was frozen. Like if I moved, the whole life I thought I had would shatter completely. I sat there staring at the wall, listening to the water stop, knowing there was no going back. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, humming like nothing in the world was wrong. That sound alone almost broke me. I sat there pretending to scroll on my phone, acting normal, while my head was screaming. I didn't confront her right away. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof that she could still look me in the eyes and lie. Or maybe I was scared that once I spoke, everything would become permanent. She walked past me, kissed the top of my head quick, distracted, and asked what I wanted for dinner. I almost laughed. The normalcy felt cruel. My chest was tight, my mouth dry. I said I wasn't hungry. She shrugged and ordered food for herself. While she ate, she complained about work. Same story she'd told me a dozen times. Same emergency project, same fake frustration. I nodded along, noticing how smooth the lie sounded now that I knew the truth. It wasn't messy. It was rehearsed. At one point she mentioned she might be out late again tomorrow. She didn't even look guilty. Just confident. Untouchable. That was the moment the shock finally turned into anger. Hot, sharp, focused. I excused myself and went into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were still shaking. I wasn't heartbroken yet. I was insulted. Like my loyalty had been taken as a joke. I decided I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I would wait until I could look her in the face and say it calmly so she'd know I wasn't guessing. So she finished dinner, washed the plate, and went to bed, completely unaware that the life she'd been lying her way through was about to collapse. I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening to her breathe, replaying every message I'd read, every lie she'd told me. By morning, the anger had settled into something colder. When she woke up, she was cheerful. Too cheerful. She stretched, checked her phone, smiled at the screen, then noticed me watching. "What?" she asked, already defensive. I told her we needed to talk. That alone flipped a switch. Her face hardened. "About what?" she said, like she didn't already know. I told her to sit down. She crossed her arms instead, leaning against the doorframe like she was bored. I asked her who he was. She laughed. Not nervous laughter, dismissive laughter. "Who?" she said. I repeated the name. Her smile flickered for half a second, then disappeared. "Oh my God," she said, rolling her eyes. "You went through my stuff?" I told her I saw the messages. That I knew about the nights, the plans, the lies. She didn't deny it immediately. She went quiet, calculating. Then she sighed like I was exhausting. "It's not what you think," she said. Classic. She said they were just talking. That I'd been distant. That she felt lonely. That it just happened. Every sentence contradicted the last one. When I pointed that out, she snapped. Raised her voice. Told me I was controlling. Accused me of invading her privacy instead of explaining why she was cheating on her husband. That's when it hit me, she wasn't sorry. She was annoyed she'd been caught. Once the denial cracked, the lies didn't stop, they just evolved. First, she said it was emotional, not physical. When I asked why she sent photos, she said that didn't count. Then she admitted they'd kissed, but only once, and it didn't mean anything. 5 minutes later, she claimed they'd slept together, but only after we'd already been basically over, which was news to me. Every version of the story painted her as a victim of circumstance. She blamed stress. My work hours. My tone. Even my silence she'd created. If I interrupted, she'd snap, "Let me finish," like this was a presentation and not the demolition of our marriage. What hurt more than the cheating was how easily she rewrote our history. Suddenly we'd never been happy. Suddenly I was emotionally unavailable. She said she tried to talk to me, even though I was the one who'd been begging for honesty for months. At one point she said, "If you were really paying attention, you would have noticed." That line gutted me. Like the affair was some lesson I'd failed to learn. I asked her if she ever planned to tell me. She hesitated too long, then said she didn't want to hurt me unnecessarily. I almost laughed at that. By the end of it, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was exhausted. I realized I wasn't arguing with someone who made a mistake, I was arguing with someone who was still protecting herself at my expense. And that realization changed everything. The calm didn't last. It came in waves, sharp, sudden bursts that caught me off guard. One minute I was quiet, staring at the floor, the next I was pacing the room, asking questions I already knew the answers to. How long? Where? Did our bed mean nothing to her? She answered some questions, dodged others. When she didn't like the direction things were going, she'd shut down or lash out. At one point she told me to stop being dramatic and said people cheat all the time. That sentence flipped something ugly inside me. I raised my voice. Not screaming, but louder than I ever had with her. I told her she didn't get to normalize what she did just because she was done feeling guilty. She stared at me like I was inconveniencing her. Then she said something I'll never forget, I didn't think you'd actually find out. That was it. The final confirmation that this wasn't a mistake, it was a calculated risk. She'd weighed our marriage against her affair and decided I was the safer option to lie to. I felt stupid. Used. Replaceable. All the trust I'd built over years evaporated in seconds. I wasn't fighting to save the relationship anymore, I was fighting the urge to say something I couldn't take back. I walked out of the apartment and sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, chest heaving. That's when the anger finally cracked and something else poured in underneath it. Grief. I stayed in the car for over an hour. Didn't drive anywhere. Just sat there, staring through the windshield, feeling hollow. The anger burned out fast, leaving this heavy, aching silence inside me. When I went back in, she was on the couch scrolling through her phone like the conversation had been a minor inconvenience. No tears. No panic. That hurt more than the shouting. It made everything feel disposable. She asked if we were done talking. I said I needed space. She shrugged and said, fine, then mentioned she might go stay with a friend for a few days. Not to give me space, because it would be less awkward. That night, the house felt unfamiliar. Every object carried a memory that suddenly felt fake. Photos on the wall looked staged, like props from someone else's life. I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped around us, and how fast that had unraveled. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed she was calling my name from another room, and every time I opened a door, she wasn't there. I woke up sweating, heart racing. By morning, she had packed an overnight bag. No apology. Just a casual, we'll talk later. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded way too final. That was the moment it truly sank in, I wasn't just betrayed, I was being abandoned in real time. The house stayed quiet after she left. Too quiet. I kept expecting to hear her keys, her footsteps, some sign that this was all temporary. Nothing came. I spent the day moving from room to room like a ghost. I picked up her coffee mug, then put it back down. I stared at the dent in the couch where she always sat. Every little detail felt heavier now that I knew how little it meant to her. The sadness finally caught up to me. Not the dramatic kind, the slow, suffocating kind. I thought about all the times I defended her, trusted her, chose her even when things were hard. I wondered how long she'd been lying to my face while I was planning our future. I checked my phone more than I want to admit. No messages. Not even a fake "Are you okay?" That silence said everything. I realized I wasn't missing her, I was mourning the version of my life I believed in. The belief that honesty was our foundation. That loyalty was mutual. That I was safe with the person I married. That night, I accepted something I'd been avoiding since the moment I saw those messages. Even if she came back tomorrow, even if she begged, the trust was gone. And without trust, there was nothing left to hold on to. The next day, she finally texted. Not to apologize. Not to check on me. Just, we should talk later and be adults about this. That message did something strange, it calmed me down. For the first time since everything blew up, my thoughts felt clear. I reread our last conversations in my head and realized how one-sided they'd been. I was drowning in emotion while she was managing optics. She wasn't trying to fix what she broke, she was trying to control the outcome. When she came back that evening, she acted cautious, like I was an unstable variable. She asked what I wanted to do, framing it like we were both equally responsible for the mess. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just told her I needed honesty, fully, no more edits. She sighed and said she didn't know if she could give me that. That she felt conflicted. That she cared about both of us. And right there, in that sentence, something snapped into place. I understood that I wasn't competing with another man, I was competing with her selfishness. And I was always going to lose that fight. That was the moment I stopped trying to save us and started thinking about saving myself. Once I stopped begging for clarity, the power dynamic shifted. She noticed it immediately. I told her I needed time apart, not as a threat, not as leverage, but as a decision. Her tone changed. Suddenly she was emotional. Suddenly she was worried. She asked if I was really serious, like this was the first time consequences had entered the room. She tried to soften the damage. Said she was confused. Said she still loved me. Said maybe therapy could help. Every suggestion came too late and felt strategic, like she was trying options off a checklist to see which one would keep her comfortable. I told her I couldn't be married to someone who could lie to my face for months and then blame me for noticing. I said trust wasn't something you rebuild while the person who broke it is still minimizing it. She accused me of giving up too easily. That stung, but it also clarified things. I wasn't giving up on us. I was refusing to carry the entire weight alone. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. Walking out felt surreal, like stepping out of my own skin. But for the first time since the discovery, my chest didn't feel tight. I knew the marriage, as it was over. And oddly enough, admitting that brought a sense of relief. Being away from her changed everything. The noise in my head quieted down once I wasn't constantly bracing for another lie. I started replaying the relationship with clearer eyes. Moments I'd dismissed as misunderstandings now looked like patterns. The impatience. The contempt. The way she made me feel small whenever I asked for honesty. I realized I'd been negotiating my own boundaries just to keep the peace. She texted sporadically. Some messages were cold and practical. Others were emotional, late at night, full of I don't know what I want and I miss you. None of them took real responsibility. Not once did she say, I hurt you, without immediately following it with an excuse. That hurt, but it also grounded me. I stopped responding to the emotional bait. I kept things short. Clear. Factual. In the quiet moments, the sadness still showed up, but it didn't feel like panic anymore. It felt like grief doing its job. I let myself feel it instead of fighting it. I wasn't healed. Not even close. But I was finally standing on solid ground, and that mattered more than any apology she still wasn't ready to give. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. No grand gestures, no sudden life changes, just small, deliberate steps. I went back to routines I'd ignored, morning runs, reading at night, cooking meals for myself instead of waiting for her to come home. I started feeling like a separate person again, instead of half of a pair constantly gaslighting myself. I also drew lines. No late-night texts from her. No we need to talk calls that came out of nowhere. I told her clearly that if she wanted any contact, it had to be honest and respectful. She tried pushing back a few times, saying I was overreacting, that I was punishing her for being human. I stayed firm. For the first time, I realized I didn't need her validation to feel grounded. I didn't need her lies to define my worth. That thought was freeing, almost intoxicating. The betrayal had broken me, but in the cracks, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. I still felt pain, sure, like a phantom limb, but it no longer controlled my every thought. I could exist in the world without her hovering in every corner of my mind. And that was enough to start rebuilding. After a month apart, we agreed to meet, not to reconcile, but to close things properly. I wasn't going to let the final conversation be a free-for-all of excuses and blame. I needed it to be honest, or at least final. She showed up with the same mix of defensiveness and charm she'd always carried. I stayed calm, steady, and didn't react to her attempts to guilt-trip me. She tried the "I still care" line. I nodded. She tried to soften her lies. I stayed silent. I spoke first. I told her exactly how her actions had affected me, how her lies destroyed trust, and how I wasn't the same person who had walked into that kitchen a month ago. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just laid it out. When I finished, she didn't argue much. I think she realized there was no negotiation left. The truth was out, and it was immutable. I walked away from that conversation feeling lighter, like a door had closed that I hadn't realized was still open. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Not really. Just a deep, quiet certainty that I had done what I needed for myself. And that was enough. Weeks turned into months. The sadness lingered, but it softened into something manageable. I focused on work, friends, and the small routines that reminded me I could exist without her drama. I rediscovered parts of myself I had neglected, my sense of humor, my independence, even little passions I'd pushed aside for us. I realized something important: betrayal doesn't just hurt, it teaches. It taught me to trust my instincts, to recognize manipulation, and, most importantly, to put my own well-being first. I learned that love without respect and honesty isn't sustainable. I don't hate her. I don't obsess over her. I've accepted that our marriage ended not because I failed, but because she chose a path I couldn't walk with her. I'm stronger now, wiser, and more careful with my heart. If I could give advice to anyone in a similar situation, it would be this: trust yourself, face the truth even when it's painful, and don't compromise your dignity for someone who repeatedly shows they don't value it. Healing isn't quick, but it's possible. And when it comes, it's worth every tear you shed along the way.